Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Trump 2024 co-campaign manager Chris LaCivita and political strategist and media consultant Thomas Mackinac.
Well, it's a cliche to say, but the man needs no introduction. A Marine who's been running the biggest races in the country for several decades, and along with Susie Wiles, ran the best presidential campaign in history to reshape and save America. And as us here in Michigan know him, Victoria's dad.
Yes.
Well, Chris, this is a loaded question. I'm told we only have 30 minutes. But what do you think the biggest single mistake that the Harris campaign made, aside from Kamala?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. It's great to be back in Michigan. It's actually great to be back on the island. And I certainly do appreciate everybody's warm hospitality. That was a great talk by Rick, who's doing such a fantastic job for the president. If he's not over in the Balkans, he's at the Kennedy Center. So, Rick's been great. And of course, Secretary Noem, you heard earlier, she's been doing a great job, and the border's literally shut down. And so all those great things that we talked about, on the campaign, we're actually doing. What a novel concept, right? And I'm glad we're doing this format just because it's a little bit more engaging. I'm not one to stand up to talk. Rick can do that really well. That's not really my style. But they have these little tidbits that they're releasing to the press now that are coming out of Kamala Harris's book. And I saw one today on my way up here, and I just couldn't help but laugh. And she was talking about, who she felt was her, who was her favorite choice for VP. And of course, she said it was, that idiot from Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. And actually, we used to call him Pete Buttigieg.
He's trying to claim Michigan now, so.
Well, naturally. She couldn't go with Shapiro, who very polished, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, battleground state. VPs don't determine the top of the ticket. They never do, but they're helpful in a sense of, they can introduce the top of the ticket maybe to a different set of voters. There are things that they can bring to the ticket. And then, so she bypassed him, and she was seriously considering Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly, being the U.S. Senator from Arizona, definitely puts on the airs, as so many of these guys do, of being a moderate where he's not. Former astronaut, he had a military record. And she said that she went by, Senator Kelly because she didn't want him to get swift-boated. Well, so I'm the one that did the swift boat ads in 2004. So I got a big kick out of that this morning. I was like, yeah, that's great. And so what did they do? They bring in that dope from Minnesota, Mike Waltz, who was just a complete idiot. That guy couldn't find his ass with both hands. Really. The guy's just a complete dope. And I remember when they took him on a pheasant hunt, and he didn't know how to load his shotgun. The guy's literally standing there fumbling, and I'm literally watching this news. I'm like, man, that's an ad. It was so great. But I think that's probably one of the, one of the bigger mistakes that the campaign made. I think the campaign's arrogance. Let's not forget that the replacement of Joe Biden wasn't a replacement. That was an actual modern day coup, plain and simple. If Joe Biden doesn't know who he signed pardons for, because we all know that Hunter was the one running the auto pen, it was a modern day coup. That's exactly what it was. And it was perpetrated by a handful of people in Washington, D.C. with a complicit National Press Corps. And it's something that we all should remember, going forward, that these kinds of things, as bad as as bad as they are when they happen overseas, you would never expect something like that to happen here. Well, it did. And then, of course, on top of all that, I could just go on and on and on about everything that they did to the president. But, you know, I think some of the things that were coming out online today were kind of amusing. God bless you. Somebody said, you know, oh, he went from working at McDonald's to being a garbage man to riding in the Queen's carriage. I mean, the King's carriage. I mean, it was like so awesome. So awesome.
Well, shifting gears and talking about our campaign, what did the Trump campaign do differently versus historical presidential campaigns? How did you reinvent presidential campaigns?
Well, you know, it really was, I mean, first and foremost, it starts with the candidate. It starts and ends with Donald Trump. I mean, it just does. I mean, the guy is a force. I've been involved professionally in politics for, 3.5 decades. I've done more Senate races. I run the Senate committee twice, and have been involved in some of the biggest U.S. Senate races in the country, the most contested, obviously the 2004 presidential race running the Swift boat stuff. And I've seen a lot, and you really see how candidates, during the course of that grind, how they persevere. And, with Donald Trump, every single day was just a lesson in stoicism. Believe it or not, it was a lesson in courage. It was a lesson in determination. I remember sitting in a courtroom in New York City, a cold, dark, courtroom, where he was being just eviscerated, and they were trying to humiliate him constantly. And then there'd be a break, and we'd go back into the back room, and there's literally damn rats the size of dogs running around. And we're sitting in there, and they bring in, enough McDonald's for 50 people. And we're just sitting there with this pile of cheeseburgers and French fries, and we're just all sitting there. And, and he's going on, and he's talking about, well, we're going to get on a plane, and we're going to go to Michigan and do a rally. And I mean, because I know we did one right in the middle of that up here. And so his ability to maintain his composure and his fixture on what the bigger picture was and why he was doing it, when he came out and said, they're not coming after me, they're coming after you. I'm just in their way. Well, that came from him. And he doesn't get enough credit for that. And that was an inspiration for all of us, not only on a staff level, but it was infectious for all of you who were out, putting up the yard signs and knocking on the doors and doing the daily grind of what constitutes a campaign. And you can't win without all of that collectively. You just can't. And so, but he just, the way he was able to take advantage of opportunities. Susie and I's role was basically to provide a professionalized political operation that could support the president no matter what happened during the course of the campaign. That there was this bedrock foundation in all 50 states that was organized, that was aggressive, that was disciplined, that was tough. No matter what the president may or may not have said at a rally, which is like, woo, where'd that come from? For us, it was about just maintaining this constant, the real work that, and you were such an instrumental part of it here in Michigan, and so many of you here, our focus was the real work started when he left. Now, and the president knew that getting into the states and doing these rallies was the motivation factor that would keep people going. But he also knew what was happening as soon as he left, because he would, and this is a guy who, one of the ways he reinvented presidential campaigns was his insistence and his complete fascination with these teletown halls. These teletown halls, I mean, I would see him even during the primaries. I mean, we'd call 60,000 people in a targeted universe. And that was another thing that this campaign did that others had not in the past, was the volume of time, effort, and money and science that we put in actually finding those voters that we knew were going to actually determine the outcome of the race. And it was one thing to find out the people who were going to vote a certain way, but also, and what they believed in, but it was also how are they consuming their information? Where are they getting it from? And so we studied these different aspects. And so the president was really, really into that. And he started doing these teletown halls, and he would, 60,000 people would get on the phone, in Wisconsin. And I'd see the ticker, and I'm like, my God, we're 40 minutes in. It's
still on
10 o'clock at night, and there's 42,000 still on the phone. I mean, and he was doing 6 or 7 of those a day. And so we were reaching, a large swath of voters. Plus, I think, our insistence, in campaigns, there's a lot of, pressures on how you're going to allocate and spend your resources. Because, basically our job as campaign professionals is to create a multi-million, in this case, $1.5 billion company, spend it to zero and get 51% market share in one day. That's basically what we do. And these corporate guys say, well, what's it like in a campaign? I tell them that's what it is. And they're like, whoa. And oh, by the way, there's somebody on the other side who's trying to knock you down. And then, of course, you have the press who's just completely bombing you. And another thing about that, too, is we don't let the noise get to us, right? That's the noise of the press. Most people aren't even watching that crap. Most people, they sure as hell aren't reading it, right? They're not reading it in the newspaper because only, I think it's down to 9% of voters are even reading the newspaper. And by the way, those 9%, they already made up their mind. So why even bother? Hello, this is the New York Times. Click. Like I give 2 damns. Who cares, And so we focused a lot on local press, local media, where we thought we would at times get a better shake. And we put the president on with some local reporter in Iowa, and they're like, oh my God, I get to interview, the former president of the United States and candidate for president. So there was a lot of different things that we did, but I think the campaign as a whole was, and the other thing about it was that we weren't a team of rivals. We were a team. And you can't, I come from the Marine Corps where, there is no I in team, and it's about accomplishing the mission. In this case, the mission obviously is the country, but the mission is electing the man who's going to save the country. And, by and large, the vast majority of the people who were integrally involved, integrally involved in the campaign are now in the West Wing. And you see that cohesiveness in the West Wing that is about accomplishing the mission. And accomplishing the mission was, passing the Working Families Tax Cut bill. And of course, we had a lot of people out there who were a key part of that. Charlie Kirk, God rest him, and Turning Point were, I don't think people realize the amount of impact that they had tactically on the ground in the implementation of the ground game that was focused on turning out low propensity voters. And one of the largest group of low propensity voters are college kids, are younger voters. And so Charlie had an operation that we literally brought into the campaign, and his willingness to work with us. And we had a court decision that actually allowed us to coordinate finally with these outside groups. And it played a major part. And of course, his leadership in creating what he did is going to be sorely missed. But it's incumbent on all of us to keep that fight going and continue to do the things that Charlie envisioned at the tender age of 17. I mean, it's amazing.
We all saw in the campaign an increase of security and an emphasis on security. Tell us about what led to the decoy plane and what plane you were on.
The decoy plane, yeah, so my security is this, for my 9mm, but, and I had security the last 3 months of the campaign. at my house. I was never there, but I had 1, 2, 3, I think 4 active death threats against me. And I was just like, here's my address. I dare you to show up. He wouldn't make it up the driveway. But, and then my wife's like, God, please stop. There obviously what happened in Butler, we were concerned even before that, just by the level of vitriol. And isn't it amazing that the left, what they say, what they accuse us of doing, they routinely do. And so, it's about high tide that, we call them out and be aggressive in calling them out. But, on that campaign, we had the president had a great Secret Service detail, his private detail. They loved him. They were all there voluntarily. And, when you take a gig with a former president, that's I'm not going to say it's a step down, but it is, in some cases, that's like your last gig that you're going to do. And Sean Curran, who was the head of the president's detail, who's the one wearing those cool glasses on that famous shot, he's now the head of the Secret Service. And of course, they tried to pin the shooting on him. It had a damn thing to do with it. There was a communications problem. The president's own team never had comms with the local PD or the other agents that are out in the field. And those guys out in the field knew the shooter was on the building, and they couldn't tell the team. The team never would have put him on the stage had there been communications. And then after the shooting, they still hadn't fixed that problem. And we actually hired a private team of people to establish some level of communications. But, by that point in time, after the president, thank God, survived that attempt, we were getting much more briefings from the Department of National Security, the DNI office, and those idiots in the Biden and White House. And they actually told us there were active threats against the airplane, and they're foreign state. And so I remember one morning we were leaving Mar-a-Lago, and the Secret Service pulled Susie and I aside and said, "Look, here's the deal. We have to move things around a little bit. We're too predictable, right? And we need to be, tactically." We need to do things a little differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 motorcades. One's going out the front, one's going out the back. They'll meet up front, and then they'll just do this all the way to the airport. So we pull up to the airport. Susie gets in one motorcade. I get in the other motorcade. And Susie didn't know, but I rigged it so that she went to the plane with the president, which was the Steve Witkoff, who's flying around all over the place now for the president in the Middle East. He's got this G650. It's a nice plane. And it's parked right next to the boss's 757. And we pull up to the 757. At the same time, that one pulls up. President gets off. Susie's like, "Wait a second. Where's Chris?" And I'm like, "Bye." And she was so pissed at me. She's still mad at me about that. But they got onto the plane with the president, and then I took the staff. The staff got onto the big plane, and I was the first one on the plane, and everybody was coming in, and the staff was getting onto the plane, and the president's tactical team was getting on a plane. And then I walked up and told them, "Shut the door." And so we shut the door, and everybody's like, "Wait, where's the president?" I said, "Well, he's not riding with us today." And they're like, "Oh, we bait?" I'm like, "Well, not exactly." And it was funny because Jason Miller is sitting in front of me. He's like, "Dude, why didn't you tell me?" And so we got on the plane. But I got to tell you, that takeoff was, because I'm sitting in these 2 seats that are to the right of the president's 4 seats, and the president, of course, is sitting there, and it was eerie, taking off and looking over to my left and not seeing him sitting in that chair, right? And then you're sitting there going, "Hail Mary, full of grace, Hail Mary, full of grace." Just as that plane is taking a rocket launch, and you're waiting for a tube to come up your ass. But thank God, it was serious, and it I think crystallized in our daily actions and everything that we were doing that. This isn't an ordinary campaign, and as I like to call it, it was a campaign of firsts. It was a campaign of firsts every single day. Because, I mean, what else could they, whoever they be, possibly do to stop us? So, and he, of course, the president fed on all of you. He fed on the response. He fed on the love and the passion, and knew that you guys were you guys were the fuel that really powered that rocket, and we were very determined. You know, I know one of the things you wanted to ask me about was politically how we were doing in the Sun Belt states. You know, we made a play very early on in Nevada. We made a play very early on in Arizona. We wanted to get those two states locked in. And Arizona is fickle as hell. I mean, very fickle. Nevada, for years, had been a Democrat state. You know, it's powered by the service unions. And, you know, and this is God's honest truth. Susie and I are having a late night dinner, well-done steak at the Trump Tower in Phoenix, in Nevada. And he's talking to a waitress, and she brings up tax on tips. And the next day, he just, no tax on tips at the and then we're like, wow, that's really good. And then the other time was on the plane, and he said, what do you guys think about no tax on overtime? I'm like, damn it, I think of that. That's a great idea. And what we saw evolving in front of us was this, these ideas that he was coming up with, that we were able to fashion into the campaign, that fit into the targeting and the targeting matrix and the issue matrix that we were developing, that were really redefining in front of everybody the modern day Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party is the party of working families, 100%, and the party of the middle class. And for years, the party never talked about the middle class. I made sure it was in every damn speech. 5 times it was in every ad. I mean, we actively pursued that, and that was something that we wanted to keep on fostering. And the president just would have these, literally, you don't sit in a room with the president and say, okay, what about this idea? That's not how he operates. That sure as hell not how you do debate prep either. You know how we would do debate prep with the president? We'd stand him up in front of 200 newspapers and TV cameras and say, okay, ask away. And he'd stand up there and do a press conference for 2 hours. What political operative, and I know there's a few here, would allow their candidate to do that? None. But with him, the President Trump excels in long format. He excels in long format, which is why he crushed every single podcast. Who, again, would allow their candidate to go on Joe Rogan for 3.5 hours? And he just, every single day, I remember he did this one with the Elk boys. They're dark comedy kind of guys, and they're kind of funny. And my son's like, Dad, you're doing the Elk? I'm like, who the hell are these? I don't even know who these guys are, but he's like, they're really big. And we knew that obviously young men were an audience we wanted to target. And they asked the president, they said, so we just want to ask you one question. He's like, sure. And they're like looking around, and they said, are there aliens? And the president just matter-of-factly goes, I've never saw any evidence. And I'm like, oh, no. You say something like, can't talk about it. The president was just very, boom, nope, none. And these guys were crushed. I mean, they were just crushed. They were so disappointed. But one question they asked the former president, it's that. I mean, come on. But he does so well in that kind of format. And so we, made sure that at every opportunity, even some of them were a little risque, but they weren't, some of these stupid ones that Kamala Harris was doing, call your daddy or whatever. What the hell? Some really weird stuff.
Well, I want to thank you for your everything that you've done to help save America.
Oh, please. I had a good team. Just glad to be part of the ride. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the weekend.